Hi everyone, my name is Shazia Khan and today's unit is 3.30 Academic and Research Skills for Law, and we've doing learning outcome 5 today, which is to be able to produce academic work. We looked at the last session, which was to do with learning outcome 4, which I'll just go through it briefly with you so you've got an idea of what we did in the last session. We looked at being able to plan and draft a piece of research. We looked at the issue around how to choose a research topic. We looked at producing academic work and what academic work means, and reflect on our own academic process. We looked at the issues of identifying which topics, areas we want to look for our research. So you could look at forced marriages, you could look at the impact of legislation on businesses, you could look at the right of minority shareholders in a takeover. So there were how you would choose a topic area and research a topic area. So we looked at that in learning outcome 4. We also looked at aims and objectives and why aims and objectives are so important in regards to identifying a research topic. Then we looked at identifying sampling techniques and the size of the research. So where you'll collect your data from, how many participants will you use data collection surveys, interviews, and will you also, what is your size and technique of the research? We also looked at preparing questionnaires and the length of the questionnaires that you need to prepare. We then looked at how your research should be divided and how many sections there should be. So we identified that there should be an introduction, which identified a brief introduction to the study, the aims and the objectives, the research significance and the rationale. We looked at the literature review, which is to critically review any sort of academic literature and prepare a conceptual framework. We looked at the sample of a conceptual framework. We also went on to look at the choice of research methodologies. So whether you want to use qualitative or quantitative research, a case study or a survey, and whether you wanted to use primary and secondary research, sampling and sample size, the data collection and analysis, and also how you want to present your data. Whether it's an analysis of data, interpretation of your findings, and any sort of comparison with academic literature. We then went on to identify that there would be a need to have a summary and conclusion, a summary of your findings, recommendations based on your findings, limitations in regards to this, and also looking at any sort of current research and scope of future work. We identified there was a need to have references in appendix and references as per the defined style, which is the Harvard referencing, any sort of questionnaires as appendix, and what the word limit would be for that. Learning outcome 5, which is what we're doing now, is to be able to produce academic work. So we're looking at producing academic work to a professional standard using the existing draft. So you get the draft reviewed by the tutor, supervisor to know that you are in the right directions. Emphasis should be on findings of the research and recommendations. And we need to identify why recommendations in research are so important. So recommendations in research are a crucial component of your research section and the conclusion of the thesis, decision, or research paper. As you conduct your research and analyze the data you collected, perhaps there are ideas or results that don't quite fit in the scope of the research topic, or maybe your results suggest that there are further implications of your results or the causal relationship between previously studied variables than covered in extent research. Recommendations for future research should be concrete and specific. They should be supported with a clear rationale, and they should be directly connected to your research. So you need to strive to highlight ways of other researchers can reproduce or replicate your results, and identify any sort of recommendations. There are many different ways to frame recommendations, but the easiest is perhaps the formula of research questions. Conclusion recommendation. Recommendations set up, example, research question. So how can teachers at local preschool ensure that social skills that contribute to maintain peer relationships are promoted in aged 1 to 4. And that's a good example. So an important condition for controlling many social skills is mastering language. So if a child has a better command of language, they can express themselves better and are better able to understand their peers. The investigation revealed that mastering language is an important prerequisite for mastering social skills. When you look at implementation, where it says you need to include an implementation plan, an implementation plan, also known as a strategic plan, outlines the steps that you should take when you're completing your research project. This plan combines your strategy, your process, and the action, and will include parts of your research that you intend to look at in more detail. So when you're doing an implementation plan, you need to define your goals, you need to define your aims and objectives, as we mentioned in Learning Outcome 4. You need to assess any sort of risks if you are doing any sort of qualitative or quantitative data, and what the risks can identify in regards to completing, this project. Also, implementation plan will define how your research project will be executed. So it'll explain, what you intend to do, how long it's going to intend to take you. So it's like a timeline, but it'll identify your intention of what you want to do. And it also will identify your skills. So it's important when we look at your implementation plan that you're able to identify your goals, what you intend to do, and also what you intend to do in regards to how you intend to plan your subject area. You need to focus on your the fact that you want to have your research paper in the plan that we did in Learning Outcome 4, which is to, identify how you want to do what plan. Firstly, what you want to do, then identify your aims and objectives of the research, because that is so important that you identify that. And the main focus is the research question. Will you be able to get enough sources to identify the research area? Any sort of valuable sources, authentic sources, and you need to emphasize what you need to achieve from this research. By the end of the research project, what is your aim, what you aim to do. And then you need to obviously look at the objectives as well. So what kind of steps you comprise, how you will, your research aim will be achieved, what you need to do, how you need to do it. You need to consider, the types of research you're going to use, the different sources. So whether you're going to be using primary, secondary sources, market research, things like interviews, or whether you're going to be using surveys, questionnaires, any sort of focus groups. And when you conduct your primary research, what kind of information are you going to be expected to get? How big is your focus group going to be? And, your secondary information, what is your intention to gain from this? So, you need to identify that in Learning Outcome 5. And here you will be looking at an area of, so you really need to have an area you have an interest in, because you need to send the draft to your tutor and supervisor. And here it would be that you need to emphasize on your findings of your research, any sort of recommendations. Like we said, you need to include an implementation plan, and the word count for this is 350 to 400 words. So here you need to know what you are doing, what research areas. So you could look at issues regarding, the issue of domestic violence, the issue of forced marriages, the issue of criminal law, anything in regards to your legal profession, legal area. You need to look at identifying any sort of research areas. So, have a look at, you must have an interest. That is the most important thing when it comes to that. So we've completed Learning Outcome 5 now, which was able to produce an academic piece of work, which you need to send to your tutor to see if you're on the right lines. And the next session that we'll be doing is Learning Outcome 6, which is looking at being able to reflect on your own academic progress. So thank you for attending this session, and thank you for your patience, and I will see you in the next session, which is learning outcome 6. Thank you.